Today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, no, we're not doing a mailbag segment. We're doing a Sicko Satchel segment. We take your questions from YouTube comments and tweets alike. Then we go over the season that Mitch Kupchak had and really just his entire career here with the Charlotte Hornets organization. All today on Locked On Hornets.
You're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. That's Doug Branson. I didn't see if you did a little dance today. I had the read in front of me, but that's okay. You can still read his work on his substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, and you can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. Doing a little something different here today, Doug. As you mentioned, we did the Sicko Brigade. We were trying to think of Hornets and / Bobcats that had like the tiniest little stretch, have had to have contributed to something, and the Sicko Brigade that took fire. And so instead of doing a mailbag segment, you decided that, no, we'll keep the sicko thing alive, and we'll just do a Sicko Satchel for, yes, all you sickos who continue to pull for the Hornets, despite it being incredibly hard to do so.
Yeah, I can't. The world doesn't need another mailbag segment, Walker. I mean, everybody does a mailbag segment. I needed something that we needed. People were calling for some kind of venue where they could ask us questions and we could answer them here on the show, and we're going to do that. But I had to name it something else, and so I thought it was appropriate, especially on this episode where we're going to be talking about Mitch Kupchak and his general manager duties over the past couple of seasons, that we call this the Sicko Satchel, because I've come to realize, especially in my talk with Howard Beck, where during the interview I realized that the amount of time that the Hornets have spent not winning a playoff series, 21 years, it would be allowed to drink in the United States,
Yeah.
which makes me want to drink. And I realized that my fandom of the Charlotte Hornets is a sickness. It is maybe even you could call it a mental illness at this point. I don't choose to follow the Hornets. I just feel that I must. And, through all of this losing and pain, I continue to celebrate this franchise because this is the franchise that I fell in love with as a child. Yeah. It was my first sports fandom love. And so I'm a sicko, and I think there's a subset of the audience here that feels the same way, that they have a sickness as well. And so we celebrate us with this Sicko Satchel.
Yeah. I mean, it's so much of our problems are what we are subjected to as children, and the Charlotte Hornets are that for us. Little did we know the Charlotte Hornets, they would become this problematic figure in our lives. The further we got away from the Alonzo LJ days, further we got away from the second round playoff appearance where they almost got to the conference finals, and then they left. And then I mean, you'd rather just that figure in your life have not gotten the milk and come back home at all. But they did.
Yeah, and this is not a negative thing. The sickness is the hope. The sickness is believing.
There you go. Rationalize it, Doug. Yes, please rationalize that it's actually good.
Well, I don't know if it's good, but I'll say I'm not saying it as a negative thing. I'm saying that the sickness is the hope. The sickness is thinking that they are going to get Wemby and that it's going to suddenly make everything better. So we've got this Sicko Satchel. I've got a number of questions. I posted this, by the way, on our YouTube community page. And so that's where we will be deriving the Sicko Satchel from. So if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Locked On Hornets podcast, and go there, go to the community page, and I'm going to post, I guess, every week. Maybe I'll do it on Friday, and then we'll try to do these on Monday. So go there and shoot us your questions. I would love the Sicko Satchel to, I want it to evolve naturally, but I would love for it to evolve into places that maybe, especially this summer as we get into the silly season, that it maybe take a non-Hornets route every once in a while. So that could be interesting as well, but I want to let it evolve naturally. Okay, Walker, I have all of these listed here in our rundown, but I don't mean for this to be in order. We didn't talk about this pre-show. This is meant to be a buffet where you and I can basically just take what we find interesting in the Sicko Satchel and go for it. What we find interesting, what we think the audience would find interesting as well. So don't take this as an order. And I want to give you first crack at the Sicko Satchel. What would you like to answer here?
Well, because the theme of the day is Mitch Kupchak, maybe we do something you've had a problem. Maybe we answered something about him that you've had a problem with him about. That didn't make any sense. But Nate wrote the question, and Nate wrote, if the lottery gods smile on us and we land Wemby, do you think this will help change the front office's mindset around acquiring star players and actually make a big splash on, say, a Jaylen Brown or a Mikal Bridges? That's the question, and I will flip it back to you. I got to choose, so you get to answer first. But this does seem like a Doug-spirited question, though, because of the way that you have criticized Mitch Kupchak for not doing anything and then doing the meme thing, getting the stick, saying do something. I leave that question to you.
Well, it's not just Mitch Kupchak. It's really this organization in general really being a neutral, believing that just somehow randomly they were going to be a playoff contender. And then once they prove, it's a chicken and the egg situation, right? They always thought Michael Jordan has even sort of explicitly said, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on this team unless I think it's going to be a contender. And I would always say back to that, how do you become a contender if you don't invest, if you don't take the risk? You're just always going to be a middling franchise, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. So, yeah, that's the problem I've already had. But I just want to say you made the perfect decision. I was hoping you would choose this one from Nate because I think this represents the Sicko Satchel best because the belief is there that they will get Wemby. But not only that, the belief is that it will magically all of a sudden change the direction of this franchise. And I hesitate to fully believe that because I think even if they got Wemby, this organization would want to see if Wembanyama is going to work out. I think a lot of people believe that it's a sure bet, and I believe it's a sure bet, but it's not 100%. And I think they would want to see if it's all going to work out, if Wembanyama truly is this generational prospect that can turn around a franchise on his own, a la LeBron James. And if that's the case, then everything sort of takes care of itself from there. I mean, you look at LeBron James and you look at those early Cavs teams, and they surrounded him with a lot of doo-doo. It wasn't like all of a sudden LeBron James came into the league and then that rookie season or even the season after that, they were attracting the big stars in the league. I know the NBA works differently now, but just in terms of player movement. But at the same time, I think they would want to see if it works before really going out there and making the big swing.
No, yeah, and I somewhat agree with that, but I think they would be very much leaning into the idea of spending a lot of money. And you and I guess we differ on how much Michael Jordan has actually spent and how much I want him to for a team that doesn't have a chance of contending. Because, right, he did spend on Gordon Hayward, and that was the big problem. He did overspend. People were defending it. But it's all about delving into the luxury tax that I don't have a problem with. If you are not contending and then you go into the luxury tax, you're a laughingstock. I mean, if you are paying that much money to be a team that is a 10 seed or beyond, which clearly they weren't going to get to a top 6 spot, then that's the problem to me, right? Don't spend the luxury tax. Don't spend that money if you're not going to be a real contender. But they did spend on Gordon Hayward. And so I think there is some kind of idea there that they know, and they've told you a million times, that they can't go big game hunting because they can't attract the Mikal Bridges or Jaylen Brown if they are in free agency. But trading wise, I do. And we know that they went after the we know the Hornets went after Donovan Mitchell, but Donovan Mitchell could not be had because of the whole Kai Jones in-season trade the pick that they didn't have access to because it went to the Knicks and then beyond. And Cleveland could beat them with any asset package that you wanted. So I do think there is that mindset to some degree. And if Wemby was here, yeah, I think they'd go all out on something like that. I think, again, they tried for Donovan. It's just, okay, Jaylen Brown, worse than Donovan as a player, I mean, Jaylen Brown is a better two-way guy, but I think Donovan Mitchell, there's a reason, all NBA kind of conversation with him. Mikal Bridges, two-way player, but not quite the level of Donovan. So are they willing to move the meter down for what they would consider a star, what they would consider all in? Because they did for Gordon when they paid him. He wanted to go to Indiana, right? But Charlotte was able to outmatch, or they were able to pay more to Gordon than what Indiana did. And so Gordon said, all right, I'll go to Charlotte. They won that sweepstakes. Not the greatest one in the world, given the injury history, but they won that sweepstakes. I think they do show that if there is a free agent they can get that has at least one all-star appearance or is flirting with an all-star appearance like a Mikal Bridges is, they will do what they can to go get him. And that only being if they feel like they have a roster that can contend, but they haven't. So my answer to this is yes. I do think they will with Wemby on the roster.
I think it's yes. It's just a question of when. Like, I don't think it's going to be they draft Wemby and then, they go immediately into free agency. Well, I don't know that they can. I mean, that's the thing. Their books are such that I think they're a little locked down. I think they would pursue. I think they would
spend money in the wrong areas, right?
I think they would let Gordon Hayward's contract get off the books, and then in Wemby's second season. And if Wemby, was suddenly rookie of the year and it was like, okay, yes, everything that we thought about Wembanyama has come true, then I think they would make that leap at that point. I just don't think it would happen immediately. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be a contending situation. We'll see. The Miles Bridges thing has a lot to do with this as well. And so maybe we can answer some of those questions coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We have plenty of letters from the Sicko Brigade that contributed to the Sicko Satchel. That is you, and we appreciate that. We'll get to it in just a moment here on the Locked On Hornets podcast. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. What you can do is you can go to the fantasy app. You can pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less points than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. So there's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on really any sport you watch as well. That includes the NBA, the NFL, MLB, men's and women's college basketball. I'll even go to disc golf, Euro basketball, and cricket. There's also plenty of other sports that you can get involved in. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. You have safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and even Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, they give you $100. If you deposit $50, they give you $50. Do not forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. More Sicko Satchel coming up next. Locked On Hornets
is Locked On Hornets.
But I have seen him go all the way up to number 10. Is there a warning? Do we need to get out of here?
Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you heard, but my watch went off, and I was trying to silence it, and then I accidentally hit ping the phone, and then the phone pinged, and now here we are. I'm doing my best, man.
It seems like you're doing your very worst.
Well, sometimes...
It seems like I'm actively fighting you today to move.
Sometimes my best is my worst.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Doug, I had the pleasure of choosing first. I will allow you that pleasure the second time. I guess I teased Miles Bridges, but we've got a lot of Miles Bridges questions to choose from here, Doug. There's a lot of people that want to know about him.
Yeah, we can kind of bundle these because I think there are a lot of questions about that. And actually, interestingly, a few questions about the 27th pick, the second.
Right.
Maybe we can get to those tomorrow. I want to get to all of these because I think they're all interesting and I want to reward people for participating in the Sicko Satchel. But yeah, let's tackle some of these Miles questions. Otis the Town Drunk, great username on YouTube, asks, is Miles a restricted free agent? And if so, what would the market value for him be, and would the Hornets match? So let me answer the restricted free agent part. Not quite yet, but he will be. The Hornets have until June 29th to extend him the $7.7 million qualifying offer again, because remember, they did so back during the last off season, and then they pulled that they mutually agreed to pull that qualifying offer during that whole process. So they would re-extend it to him by June 29th, and then June 30th he would be a restricted free agent at that point. And so Walker, if they do that, which they are widely expected to, what do you think the market value for him would be, and do you think the Hornets would match?
No, so I have talked about this. It is the wide range salary gap that I just don't know where it's going to land. I don't, and I've talked about this too, right? With PJ Washington, you can relatively guess based off reporting, based off where you think he is as a player, that he's going to get somewhere in the $15 to $20 million range. And if you're wrong, right? Like if you're wrong about that, then you might be wrong on one end of the spectrum by what? $2 million at most. That we can relatively deduct the impossibilities of what he would get, right? I just don't know with Miles Bridges. I just don't. I don't know what I think he's going to get the qualifying offer. He's going to become a restricted free agent. We all expect that to happen with Charlotte. I don't know if Miles would only make 13 based off him being out for only a year or for a whole year, a little bit more so into next season. And plus he was arrested for a felony offense. So how much does that bake into the cake of what the teams would actually pay him? He was set to get close to 30 million before this happened. I don't think it gets back to 30, but that's the kind of picture I'm trying to paint as far as how wide the gap is. I mean, if you still view him as that potential player, you might get close to 30. If you don't, and you actually, whether it be cynical, wanting to take advantage of a low price point, or whether it be actually based in morals and you don't want to give him that much money, but you do want to welcome him, whatever line of morality that means, then it might be a little bit lower. I wish I could tell you something, Doug. Maybe you have a better idea. I just really have no clue, to be perfectly honest, how much Miles Bridges is going to make.
I don't either. And the reason is because there are so many variables. There is the variable of another team coming in and deciding that they could also take the PR hit that would come with bringing in Miles Bridges, and they could weather all of that and explain that to their fan base. Is there a team desperate enough to compete, more desperate or as desperate as the Hornets are to compete in the playoffs, to deal with that? And would they come in and try to, test the Hornets' ability to match? Because the Hornets have been very verbal dating back to that last offseason about their intentions here. So, and when you do that as a team, you are sort of negotiating against yourself. You're telling other teams, hey, you could give them the max if you want. We're going to match it. So I think there's that variable. The other variable, I think, is what's the commitment going to be? Is it going to be a shorter term commitment than it would have been, previously, where they were looking to give him, max years and max money? Is it going to be a shorter term, like, hey, because all this happened, we believe in you, but, and we want a future with Miles Bridges, but maybe we don't, we want to hedge our bet a little bit, essentially, and do a shorter term deal that may be a little bit higher on the dollar amount because it's a shorter term deal? Or do you sacrifice, if you're Miles Bridges' team, do you sacrifice a little bit of that top dollar amount to ensure that you are going to be under contract for the next 3 or 4 seasons? But I'm with you, man. I just cannot guess. I guess, do you think, if we know that it's going to be 15 or 20 for PJ, is it possible that this organization could commit less money to Miles than PJ, which would seem odd just from a talent perspective, right? Yeah. I don't think anyone would look at the talent level of Miles Bridges versus PJ and go, well, PJ deserves more money.
Yeah, maybe. I think if you were to force me to guess, then I'd probably guess close to 20 million. That I'd probably put 20 million as that mark. But again, I'd willingly accept that possibility of being, very wrong. But 20 million is what I would guess with Miles. And so, yes, I guess if PJ doesn't get his full asking price, then you expect him to get something like 18. Yeah, I do think that's a very real possibility. You want to answer one more Miles question and then dive into Mitch Kupchak, or what do you want to do, Doug?
Yeah. Let's go to Jacob here in the Sicko Satchel. Let me get through this, and then we'll we'll tackle this. So
is that a Jakob with a K in the middle, or is that Jacob? Because the K throws me off. I feel like if it's a K in the middle, then it's Jakob. But maybe
it could be Jakob, could be Jacob. Don't know for sure. But the question is, Clifford used to play Miles Bridges as small forward when Miles first came in the league. Since then, he's been more of a power forward and has been successful. Do you think Clifford tries him at small forward again so that he can be out there with PJ? So clarification here, Miles came into the league under Borrego. First year of Borrego and Mitch Kupchak, wasn't Clifford. But here's the thing, that I think all of the years are starting to blur together at this point. Like, I'm going to let Jakob or Jacob off the hook a little bit, Walker, because I think it's all like the Borrego, the Clifford's back, but he used to be here. It's all for the sickos. I think it's all starting to blur together, right?
I think you're right. Yeah, especially with the whole, 1 year off for Miles, and it's like, wait, okay, if we account for that 5 years ago, oh wait, that Clifford was still here. No, actually, it was Borrego. Remember the weird stat how Borrego during his last season was actually one of the longer tenured coaches in the NBA, and just being here in his fourth season, ridiculous how you get hired to get fired in this industry. Yeah, I think a lot of that, him moving to power forward, happened with Gordon Hayward's addition, right? Like, if you go to his rookie season, Gordon was not on the team at that point. And then the next year, Gordon Hayward became a member of the team. That's when you started to see Miles phased out a little bit, especially with PJ's growing prominence to the team. So I think that's what allowed Miles to move more to that 4 spot. Gordon's got 1 year left on his deal. I don't think they're going to trade him. I think there's a possibility with the team wanting to, make $30 million more room the next year on their payroll, maybe get him for some kind of playoff run if he's healthy, whatever. But the stars have to align pretty well. And if that doesn't, likely won't, then that means Gordon's going to be on the team again next year. And so, yeah, I think Miles probably will be your power forward, because if the idea is playing your best 5, that means LaMelo and Terry, as long as he's still on the team, in the backcourt, Dennis Smith Jr. coming in defensive situations. That means Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, Gordon Hayward all on the floor, but Mark Williams is going to be in the starting 5 as well, you would think, at that real center spot. So, yeah, I mean, that's honestly a great question we haven't talked about, Doug. Like, PJ coming off the bench, that's –
well, I'm paying $20 million for a player that's coming off the bench. I mean, that's –
yeah, I mean, so or Miles – yeah, I mean, I don't know. So maybe if you get his feet wet, that's the question I haven't thought much about, honestly. Thank you, Jacob, whoever you are, for actually bringing us down that little rabbit hole.
Yeah, I think even if they were to be able to trade Gordon Hayward, because you got to have another team willing to do that. I don't think that would happen, around draft time or any time during the offseason. I think it would happen around the trade deadline when teams have a little bit more clarity about what their situation is, and a team would be willing to take that contract on to get the money off the books in the next season to sort of reset their books. So it's not going to, so saying that, they're going to have Gordon Hayward available, and I believe that they would continue to allow him to start, because I think they feel like Gordon Hayward gives them an opportunity to compete down the line, if they were to make a playoff series. I think, though, with Gordon Hayward, you have some more availability or more flexibility in your lineup, because I don't think he's going to play significant, like super significant minutes every night. Like, I don't see him as like a 38 to 40 minute player. So I think even if one of those players does hit the bench, Miles or PJ, you're going to see some fluidity between Miles playing small forward and power forward, and PJ playing power forward. And sometimes when they play PJ at center, for a small lineup, I think what they view this situation as having, different chess pieces for different situations.
Well, and that's something Mitch Kupchak has talked about through team building. He wanted to be versatile. He wanted to be switchable all across the lineup. And that's why you get PJ. That's why you get Miles Bridges. And eventually, some of that allows you to be a little versatile. Speaking of Mitch Kupchak, let's talk about him. Coming up next in the last segment on Locked On Hornets.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll start to focus on Mitch Kupchak with his season in review. We've already done a lot of the players. We've done Steve Clifford. Now it's time for the general manager. What do we make of the moves that he made, maybe going back all the way to last offseason to set up the past season we saw and beyond? Mitch Kupchak coming up next. Locked on Hornets.
Is Locked on Hornets.
Walker, sometimes you don't have to have the best package.
Okay.
Sometimes you just have to have the only package. If you wait, or this is if my dating life taught me anything, sometimes you just have to wait around long enough until you're the only thing remaining. And then suddenly you look pretty great in comparison.
It's time for more of the Locked on Hornets podcast.
Doug, where do we start with Mitch? Because we can go back to last offseason, and we've referenced the saddest show of all time that eventually led to Mark Williams. And so maybe we were a little dramatic with that show, but we didn't love the process in getting there. And that was on draft night. We were both in hotel rooms. Your hotel room literally had a flickering light, and eventually it just shut down. The mood, it was too much for the light to shine through, and it was a lot of darkness. And it was really after the Hornets essentially traded for a worse draft pick in the following season. They traded their 13th overall selection. They would eventually select Mark Williams, but they drafted Jalen Duren with the 13th selection. They traded him to New York. The Knicks then sent Duren and then former Hornet point guard, by the way, Kemba Walker, to the Detroit Pistons for a first-round pick. Detroit sent Charlotte the Nuggets 2023 first-round pick and 4 future second-rounders. So they did get some second rounders. They did get the Nuggets pick, but of course that's going to be worse. It's going to be 27th right now. We'll see what the Nuggets. I don't know what the lock-in situation is there, but
I think it's 27th. I think that's.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. So that's where we started. Didn't love it just based off of the process, Doug. And since then, really, it was only bring in Cody Martin, kind of fall into Dennis Smith Jr. and Teo Maladon. Those are the moves. Like, there's
you signed the wrong twin. You signed the wrong twin.
Oh no, don't do it. But yeah, those were the moves, Doug. Like, what do you think of when you think of this past year for Mitch?
Well, and remember the rationalization that Mitch explained on trading the second first-round pick,
problem.
Which is essentially that they had too many young players that they wanted to evaluate because they didn't get a fair, or at least from their perspective, they didn't get a fair evaluation of James Bouknight and Kai Jones. Mitch Kupchak saying he wanted to see Borrego play those players more. And so they just essentially had too many young players that they wanted to see first. And so they decided, and really, I mean, you could read between the lines there and think, okay, they didn't want to pay another first-round salary. And that, in retrospect, looks like an even worse decision because James Bouknight did not have a good season. Kai Jones made some improvements, but I don't think you and I, we've already done the Kai Jones season in review, and I think you and I both landed on not ready yet, not sure if he'll ever be ready or if he's going to be ready in time for the Hornets to have to make a decision on extending him a new contract, but he's certainly not ready right now. So in retrospect, I think, kicking that first round pick down the road and making it a worse pick, I think it looks like a pretty bad decision. And then I want to take us back actually even further in the past, which is I think we got started with this offseason for Mitch Kupchak, not even knowing if he was going to continue to be the general manager. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Like there was confusion around his contract's up. They're not really talking about it. They're not telling us, hey, we've re-signed Mitch Kupchak or we're moving on. And, from a fan perspective, if you're paying attention to that at all, I think you have to feel a little bit weird about that, right? Mitch Kupchak suddenly shows up, is like, yeah, I'm still the general manager. And it's like, okay, no announcement, no like, hey, we like the direction this team is going. Huh?
Well, the reason we found out is that was my contribution to the press conference. Like, hey, Mitch, are you going to be back?
Well, he showed up. You assumed that, I guess he's here.
So I asked him because of Jake Fisher. Don't know if you've heard of Jake Fisher before, but he's
going fishing.
Yep. What you got?
A big one.
Yeah, Jake Fisher. He was talking about how Mitch Kupchak, there was an idea that he might just move to a different role. Mitch Kupchak would move to a different role within the organization. So I asked him during the press conference that he held after the regular season going into the next offseason during draft time, something like that. And he said, yeah, we signed a 2-year deal, essentially. We signed a contract, and that was the breaking news from the presser, really. And that's how we found out. But you're right. It was weird going into it. And we didn't know if he was going to be a part of the team, and now he is. He's got another year left. We'll see what happens after that. I would imagine after the next season, it probably is going to be done for him, just based off of the rumblings that we heard, and then him only having, I think, the 2-year contract, if I'm not mistaken, that he signed afterwards.
Well, and if the team sells this offseason, then I think you could make an argument for Steve Clifford remaining as the head coach, even though I think it would be unlikely if a new ownership group came in that they would keep the head coach as well. You could make an argument there. For Mitch Kupchak, there is no argument. I think they would, completely clean house in the front office and make something new. So we don't know for sure whether Mitch Kupchak is going to be the general manager that ushers in this offseason if there is a team sale. But he did, Walker, he did do something. It wasn't a lot, but we asked him to do something heading into the trade deadline. And he essentially made the team slightly worse, or at least prevented them from going on a run by trading away Jalen McDaniels. And in return, they got Svi Mikhailuk, SU Svi, which was entertaining, at least. And then trading Mason Plumlee for a 2028 second-round pick.
Which needed to happen.
Right. Well, that's the whole thing. It's not that he really did something to improve the team. It's that he did something in order to take away some pieces from Steve Clifford and allow this team to, at least maintain those fourth pick odds.
Well, and again, he leaves with Mark Williams. He leaves the NBA draft with Mark Williams. He drafted a correct player. Like, you still might want Jalen Duren more. That might happen, but he had a good season.
I wanted them both. People say, "Oh, well, you didn't like Mark Williams. Look how he turned out. He turned out pretty well. You wanted Jalen Duren." It's like, no. What if we had both? What if you had a guy that was like physically, you didn't have, you could play them together in the rotation? What if you had those two guys complement one another? Anyway.
Well, I didn't want both, but I wanted another player, right? Like both, yes, we had the same idea, maybe just different players. But the idea was to take another draft pick, take another guy that is one selection out of the lottery, or in the 13th overall selection case, he was within the lottery. So those are some of the guys you missed out on, right? Ochai Agbaji, AJ Griffin, Tari Eason, Jake LaRavia, Dallin Terry, but Malachi Branham, Christian Brown, Walker Kessler, those were three guys.
Oh, Walker Kessler. Oh.
Well, I mean, even for me, Griffin and Branham, just because of more talent on the wing for me. Like, I mean, yeah, Walker Kessler was awesome, but I'm cool with Mark as the center. Like, you got one. I just wanted to get another talented ball handler, somebody that could shoot, somebody that can make plays offensively. But then they gave us the reasoning of, well, we didn't want to have another young player here. And then you traded up for Bryce McGowens, who looks like a good player. I don't know. Just, yeah, that didn't make any sense to me. But he did walk away with Mark. Like, that's the problem with Mitch. Okay, there's always an and but on every side of the argument with Mitch Kupchak. Okay, drafted Miles Bridges. Damn you. He traded SGA. Okay, Miles Bridges actually hit, but it happened so late. All right, and now he clearly wasn't a part of the team last year. He drafted PJ Washington. He's good. He's not going to be an all-star, but he's going to make $20 million. All right, man, you traded for a worse pick, but you walked away with Mark Williams. This is the experiment. Hell, this offseason, man, you didn't do anything but bring back Cody. Well, I guess you got Dennis Smith Jr., and he was really good. Like, there's always an and or a, but with Mitch Kupchak. That's how you have to talk about him.
I think so. I think apart from that, though, my big problem, my 30,000-foot problem with Mitch Kupchak is that he is the de facto communications face of the franchise in terms of the direction season to season and the overall vision, because we never hear from Michael Jordan anymore. So he really is the de facto face of the franchise. And I think as a communicator, he struggles to really communicate to fans a positive vision of this franchise. Too often we hear about what this franchise can't do, what it's not capable of doing. And it's why I think that a franchise sale and a cleaning of the house would be good for just the overall morale of the fan base, because you would hope that that new ownership group would bring in people that would then communicate a positive vision of what a hopeful vision for the Sickos. The Sickos need the hope. That's what we feed on. And we need the hope, and we haven't been getting a lot of hope, I think, from Mitch Kupchak. It's been a lot of just wait and see. We got a plan, but we'll just wait and see. There's not a lot we can do otherwise. We got to stick to what we're doing here because we have no other choice. And I feel a little bit like a hostage almost to what their plans are, rather than somebody who gets on board and says, yeah, no, I totally understand what you're doing here, and I'm on board. So that's my big problem. And I think what's interesting too to watch is if this team doesn't sell, Walker. Remember, Rich Cho was fired in the middle of the season, after like a 24-33 start. And then, we started the Mitch Kupchak era. So like if they get off to a bad start in this next season, where they've already said, hey, playoffs, that's the expectation. If they get off to a bad start, next season, one wonders if Mitch Kupchak even survives, this entire season.
And I wonder if it'd be a step down situation because Michael doesn't want to fire Mitch or something like that. You do the whole, hey, he's going to go to a different role type of thing,
right?
Which fine. But I think that might be the thing that could happen. That's the season in review for Mitch Kupchak. We'll be back. What's next on our list here, Doug? We have a couple more to go, not many.
James Bouknight.
James Bouknight. That's a big one. That'll be tomorrow. We still have Cody Martin, Bryce McGowens, Jalen McDaniels, Teo Maladone. All of those guys still left on the docket. But James Bouknight, he'll be up tomorrow. We appreciate you listening to us and making us your first listen. As always, make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Sicko Satchel, James Bouknight, that'll be up tomorrow.